Are you one of the many people for whom drawing trees is a never-ending source of difficulty? They end up looking anything but realistic. Can I suggest that I think a huge part of this problem is the way we view trees. In some ways, we see them with too much understanding, too much knowledge about what we're looking at. Plus the difficulty that when we draw from a photo, which for so many of us is the most practical way for us to draw, it captures so much of the detail that we also understand is there, and therefore we see it easily, that it becomes overwhelming. And so all the leaves become a problem because we feel like we either ignore them and end up with a cartoon-like looking flat shape, or we try and draw them and simply get overwhelmed with the complexity of how many there are and how they're arranged and the different shapes that they have and the way they hang on the tree and the way they catch the light. Because we also end up with a very complex, in many tree cases, and in this one say, we end up with many complex patterns of light and dark and mid shades and shadows in our tree canopy. And so that's part of the problem, that all of this becomes overwhelming to see, to understand, and then to try and represent, because we often start by trying to draw leaves. And because that becomes overwhelming, we end up developing a bit of a leaf pattern, which really is more a symbol than a representation of what's there. And that can take a lot of time and end up looking very unsatisfactory. And it can be hard to use that to create light and dark shadows as well. So I really believe that in order to be able to draw trees effectively, and can I say this tree took me under 15 minutes to draw. So you're watching this at 1 1/4 speed. So it's only slightly faster than my actual drawing speed. So this technique that I'm talking about is incredibly brisk if we need it to be. We can really capture, I think, an excellent effect of a tree easily and quickly and confidently. Now, you'll see that the first thing I did was to, using light, loose, and very broken lines, and not so much in this case, but sometimes even dots, I outlined, if you like, the major sections of tree canopy. And this was also to help me appreciate the 3 dimensions of it. I tried to outline sections that I could see were coming out at me. One of the problems when we see a tree is that we often think of it as being very flat because it's a 2-dimensional experience we have with the photo. The first way we need to see the tree differently is to see it as in a 360-degree ball coming out in all directions, and some parts coming closer to us than others. So understanding that is very helpful because we can draw the parts that are coming out more, in other words, that are closer to us, with a little more detail, a little more darkness, a little more effect on the edges and so forth. And therefore give the feel that it's a little bit closer. And this now starts to help create sense of 3 dimensions. But the other thing we need to do is to stop thinking of leaves and just think of surface. See this as an undulating surface of, in this case, of bulges that come out and parts of the canopy between the bulges that go back and have darker shadow. And also to see this as, in general terms, a ball. Well, maybe half a ball, a hemisphere is more accurate. And the light's coming down from the top, slightly from one direction. And that means that the shade is cast very consistently. And one of the ways that we can help work out the shape of the tree is because of how the shadows are cast. And so what I like to think of doing with trees is to not to see leaves particularly, but to see shadows. And I need to create the effects of the shadows, which when combined with edges and similar things, do help to create the sense of the tree. But the important thing, if I want my tree to look 3-dimensional, is to capture the 3-dimensional changes in the way that the shade and the shadows are generated by the position of the sun on this particular canopy. And so it's always seeing the big picture. Now, there are times when we need to come down small. So for instance, when I firm up my edges, my silhouette edges, particularly of the tree, it's important just to be a little bit more conscious of the effect we're going to create. We don't want to make them too large because that will make the tree look smaller because they'll look like leaves rather than bunches of leaves. Or if we do want to create a sense of this is a leaf, then we have to make sure that the size of our marks really does, in proportion to the overall size of the tree we're drawing, line up with the proportionate size of the leaves in the photo with the overall size of the tree in the photo. Otherwise, we change the sense of scale. Now, you can see that the other thing I'm doing is that I'm working hard not to be too over. I'm trying hard to create some nuance in my shading though. I'm trying to not make the surface too simplified and to realize that it's not just basically black or white, but there are shades of grey as well. There are some parts of the canopy that come out, not enough to be in direct sunlight, but enough to catch a lot of the bouncing light that we have around. Never underestimate the effect that bouncing light can have. And so with this roadway in front and the ground next to it, there's a lot of light bouncing up that catches parts of the tree canopy on the underside that aren't in direct sunlight, but it stops them being as dark in value as areas deeper into the canopy or further back that aren't having as much light bounced on them. So have a look at the way I'm building this up, and notice that I do like to build it up across the whole canopy because it's hard to work out how dark to make the dark parts all at once from beginning to end in just one part. I really need to get a sense of how the lights and darks across the whole tree canopy are working. And what's really helpful is to, in a tree such as this, where there is a lot of variation, is to be looking at the big picture values and saying, okay, in broad terms, where is the very lightest light parts? Where are the parts where the light is really highlighting the, if you like, the lightest leaf color we're going to see? And where is it darker? And within those darker areas, where is it darker again? And then particularly, where are the darkest values in the tree canopy that we can see? Where are the parts where it becomes almost black? Because they're the parts I actually want to create the shape of those darknesses with my hatching. Now, I'm not going to make it black because I'm not colouring in, but I'll do more hatching closer together to create those sorts of shapes, to define those sorts of, if you like, clumps of foliage as a subset of the canopy, and the gaps between them. And now you see me just adding a little bit of contrast. We have this fence. I need to make sure I foreshorten the posts that go backwards. So the actual tree probably took me well under 15 minutes by the time we allow for some of these extra details. So it's all to do with how I observe and think and process what I'm seeing, and then create in my mind something that's really a bit removed from the actual tree. I conceptualize the tree in a way that makes it far easier to draw than to focus on what I know about trees in general and what I can see if I look closely about the detail of this one. Because if I do that, it's going to overwhelm me with the complexity. I need to simplify how I see the tree, but still see it in a way that's going to let me capture the characteristics of this particular type of tree in this particular lighting situation. Why not have a go drawing this yourself? And if this is helpful, please hit the like button for me and help me out as well. You'll find this photo of the tree on my channel community page if you'd like to have a go. So why not? And try and see the tree differently. Not to see it as a tree, but to see it as a surface, the canopy at least, as a surface, an irregular textured surface that moves in and out and towards and away from us and captures the light to different degrees, and to create hatching lines that replicate that light and dark, but to do it with nuance to get lovely rounded effects. It's surprisingly simple once we start to be able to use this technique confidently. It certainly made trees one of my particular joys to draw, and I hope they can become such joys for you as well, particularly if at the moment they're a bit of a struggle, a bit of a thing to try and avoid, and particularly if they're a weak spot in your drawing. I hope this will help you. And I have a Drawing Trees playlist with dozens and dozens and dozens of videos that are all connected in what they present with this way of thinking about trees, with this way of conceptualizing, but see it with many different types of tree varieties and a variety of marks that we can use to capture the different effects that different tree canopies create, different leaves create, and so forth. They really don't need to be a weak spot in our drawing, and they're so common that it's really worth a little bit of effort to just work on a technique of seeing them and drawing them that works in our drawings. And I could have drawn this tree in 5 minutes using these same principles, but just a simplified style, or vice versa. I could have drawn it in more detail in longer time, but it would have looked basically the same. I'm not sure what's happening here, but I've slowed right down, obviously. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. So why not give this a go, particularly if drawing trees is a bit of a challenge or an effort or something that you put off, and learn to love them, as I certainly do. And I hope this video and this way of thinking and drawing has been helpful. I've used a 0.3mm pen in this demo. But hey, whatever you draw, trees or not, however they look and whatever way of drawing them you use, make sure you have fun. And I'll see you next video. Bye.